Okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another fantastic.
Fantastic?
Yeah, there we go. That one. Fantastic episode of the OSINT Output. I try to say the OSINT Output with fantastic. That never works.
Fantalpit.
Yeah, that's what we do in the South. We combine words to make new words that no one else can understand. But
Portmanteaus?
yeah, right.
If you want to call me fantastic for the whole episode, and that's just my name.
Yes,
that's
we
fine.
have fantastic Charlie on here again, guys.
I keep wanting to call her Sydney.
Yep.
Just in my head, Sydney Black is what sticks as your name, and I know that's not your actual name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that will be your nom de guerre for Chris forever. But we have Charlie on here again, guys, who is going to deliver a fantastic story and actually talk to us about different techniques that she used, which, in my opinion, is one of the greatest stories to tell. So,
I want to use the word fabulous or amazing or spectacular as opposed to fantastic.
I feel like you're just what he's doing is he's thinking about all the Spider-Man comics that he's read in his head, and he's like, okay, I got to use all those same adjectives to describe Charlie, which I am totally down with, because after hearing the story for the first time, I really can't wait to hear it again.
Yeah, I'll sign documents, whatever you need.
Yes.
I love it. All right, we're gonna copyright it just for us.
Yeah.
I know, we're just kidding. But Charlie, if you want to, please take it away. You can start from the top, or you can introduce a little bit of backstory, however you want to get started.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's great. Yeah. This is something that I want to emphasize when I talk about open source intelligence, is that it's a means to an end. It's a tool in a toolkit for solving answering investigative questions. On its own, I think that open source intelligence is talked about a lot, like an end in itself. And the data that open source intelligence, spits out is somehow closer to the truth and more reliably pointing to the truth than, say, human intelligence. Which is regarded with the opposite kind of bias. If somebody, for example, we have a case in Chatham where and the family is, and they want me to talk about this, so that's fine. There's a family in Chatham, and what happened was their daughter, Robin McCall, was found hung in her shed in the backyard. And there was an investigation, but it was short, it was perfunctory. They interviewed very few people, and they didn't, there's a lot of talk, families, whenever they lose somebody, a lot of people don't want it to be suicide when that happens, because there are religious prohibitions, and it's just harder to grieve for a lot of people when the person that they lose, has taken their own life. And that's the majority of, quote, complaints about the police ruling it suicide that they get. But, if, 9 times out of 10, it's suicide, and it's just the family being upset about that, there's still that 1 time out of 10 where no, it was totally staged, and the family and friends of the victim are correct. It was not a suicide. And it's actually something, if you just do a little bit of homework, that is, statistically not common, but there are a lot of cases and a lot of people in the world. So when you say that 1% of suicides or whatever are staged, I'm not saying that, but when you cite a low statistic, that can still be 1,000 people. It's still a thing that happens and needs to be accounted for. The point being is that there is an investigation called for, always. However, quote, obvious it might be to you, and you get on the scene that it's suicide, the police are still, required to conduct an investigation and make sure of that, because a life has been lost. So in this case, when that didn't happen, and when the investigation was perfunctory and skipped people and was very short, they, the family and friends of the deceased were begging for an investigation, probably driving the police a little crazy about it, with follow-up.
So,
but the police,
why wouldn't the police really go for an investigation for this? Was it just all the initial stuff said, hey, 100% suicide, or
Well, they didn't. So that's a good question, because we followed up with the police. We submitted a 35-page report of lots of evidence that they didn't, they didn't allow us any access to the investigation that they did conduct. Because there was a review going on, and it was closed, but anyway. So we just start again and conduct an investigation, and it sounds like we would be repeating what the police would be doing, and there was a tiny little bit of that. Like, we interviewed, I think, 3 people that the police also talked to. Two of them over the phone. But everything else we were doing from scratch. They didn't notice, like, for example, in this, when I spoke to the police, I was about to go off and just leave that, but I didn't answer your question. To answer your question, when I asked the police after they reviewed my report, and after they sort of, after the police officer that was reviewing the case to see if they were going to reopen it was not the same police that was on it in the first place. They basically said that, it was, quote, obvious to them, that was the word that he used, that it was suicide, and that, based on what they did see, and that was strictly on the physical evidence, is that they based that on what they saw at the scene. So it was something out of context, for one thing. Like, they go into the shed, they see, it was a body suspended from a rope. They're not looking at the details too much, except to see that, well, she could have done this. Physically, it's possible that this woman that we've just met right now has, executed this. And so, that's really, and after that, and this is so I was talking to somebody about this, another investigator about this yesterday, actually. In the past, when police would, because there's a lot of reasons why police might not want a particular case to be suicide, or where they might prefer that it's not homicide, is a better way to put it. When there's jurisdictional issues they don't want to deal with, or if they're over, there's a lot of reasons. Like a lot of reasons why at anyone's job, they have a task that, comes on their desk, and they're like, oh, I really don't want to do this. I hope I get an excuse to not do this. So in the case of the police, it used to be, there weren't 10, 15 different ways that you can examine a crime scene that would bring you information that you can use to find a killer. And the obvious thing in that case is forensics. So, fingerprints, DNA, etc. So they could look at a crime scene and basically cover it thoroughly and talk to a lot of people, and they can still arrive at a conclusion that they, as an institution, as a place in a point in time with, being busy and biases and whatever, can come to the conclusion that that works for them. And I don't think it's deliberate. I'm gonna be upfront. I don't think that somebody's going okay, how do we not find the truth here, and let's just stick to that. I think it's just bias in this case anyway. It's just a few things at work. But today, if you're really busy, the police are under pressure to only discover certain kinds of cases where they know they can prosecute, because if it's too hard to prosecute, it's bad for the department, it's bad for the cops involved, etc. You go and the police only find what they choose to look for. So if you go to the scene, and in this case, for example, they interviewed 2 people that had been there, the last people that she saw, there was 3 of them. The police interviewed 2 of the 3. They were 2 men who were the case called a homicide. They would be the principal suspects just because they were the last ones to see her. One of them was there even after, and he was the last one to see her. It's a bit complicated, but that's what happened. They're the only 2 of those 3 that the police spoke to. The other one Like when we spoke to the police, they said, well, we didn't know there was another person there. And like, I mean, no one was hiding her. Like, I mean, like, all the,
So
it's
to me, it kind of sounds like leading up into it, there was a lot of confirmation bias that were kind of leading them in circles at the beginning rather than kind of pulling on every single thread. And I do want to kind of compare it to how some DUI stops are performed down here in the States. I don't know if they're performed the same way in Canada or the rest of the world, but you can go through a police officer, a detective, what have you, can go through training to detect certain physical signs that a person is under the influence of a substance,
yes.
and that can be admissible in court. So rather than actually going through the scientific process of taking a person's, using a breathalyzer, taking a person's blood after the fact, they just go purely based on what the police officer says and no other evidence at all to issue a citation or make a judgment in a case.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the problem with the police making calls like that is that, medical science, isn't part of police training. Like sociology or sociological topics aren't like demographics. It's all focused on law enforcement and rather than investigative principles. So they're like, yeah, no, there's a stop and you're looking for this. And if they could skip the science, they kind of want to. They don't necessarily see the value, so they just sort of blow past it. But, what if the thing with physical signs of being under the influence is that there are also physical signs of certain medical conditions. There's certain, if you have epilepsy, a seizure doesn't always look like a person falling and a person can be having, can be suddenly dealing with a seizure. People I'm not a doctor either, but what I do know is that when I look at a person, and this is like the way we approach, it's fundamental to the way we approach investigations, that we can't make assumptions about anything, regardless of what my firsthand quote unquote experience has been, no matter how many years I've been at this. People and the way they behave and what my senses are telling me, the connections to some event or, a person's disposition or health status or whatever, they'll always surprise you. There's always, people, there's a lot of, we like to, when we want a short way to an answer, we really like saying probably. Like, probably is a word that we use to dismiss other possibilities besides an answer that is the easiest one. And because it's talking about statistics, and if you're in a position where you have to say, come up with a policy that you're administering in a population of people, the probabilities are important because they refer to talking to they refer to the greatest good for the greatest number. But when you're talking about, when you have a case in front of you that's an individual, what's quote probably true is irrelevant. It's where you start, maybe, this is probably suicide, because most cases that we see like this are, statistically speaking, suicide. But if you're in an individual case and you have more information available to you, you just the only reason we use statistics at all, the only reason we respect those numbers at all is because it is impossible to get at more specific, bits of information, because you're dealing with, 10,000 people. You're not dealing with one case, you're dealing with 10,000 people with 10,000 different cases. When you're dealing with a case head on, probably, on Slack, I don't know do you know what Slack is? Okay, well, to explain for the audience or whatever, it's a virtual, it's like having an office building, a virtual office building that you and your coworkers walk into. So you walk into a lobby, and you could talk in that lobby, and then you have rooms in the building that are assigned to different things. So there's the investigation office, and there's the general administration office, and You're allowed in some rooms and you're not allowed in others because you don't have the clearance or whatever. We work on that, and you can change. They have a little bot. It's like an AI bot called Slackbot, and like if you use the word help, it'll automatically pop up and be like, "Do you need support?" And no one ever needs Slackbot. Never. No one wants you there, Slackbot. You just go. But in the back end, you can program Slackbot to say whatever you want in response to whatever you want. So I programmed Slackbot to anytime somebody uses the word probably, I programmed Slackbot to respond, but maybe not. So that, like, when we're having conversations about investigations and somebody's
We
like,
do that for our intel analysts all the time in the government. So, like, probably and likely are words that carry significant connotation for that, and they're 50%. Okay, something probably happened, but it also probably did not.
Probably is 50 to 80%. Like, that's a huge range to be accurate. I use probably
Oh yeah,
because
you're an NGA analyst. You guys use probable all the time.
I use probably because I think I'm probably wrong, but it's my best guess. And then you should really use the Slack bot to set up a clue game on Slack, because that's kind of what the screen looks like anyway.
Oh my god, it's amazing. Yeah, no, Slackbot. I had Slackbot saying all kinds of dumb things for a while, and then but my business partner just like it got on her nerves. So, like I programmed Slackbot to say that's what she said every time.
There you go.
Every time somebody said, what was it? It was if they were like I think we should, or something. So whatever came after that, Slackbot would be that's what she said, and oh my god, it was so funny. And me and like two other people on the channels were like, this is amazing, I love Slackbot. But my business partner was like, can you please get rid of Slackbot? Like, this is a business. Wewe're professionals.
It has me around to say the dumb things.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Going back to the story of
Right.
the woman. So you found out that there was another witness. You managed to talk to them.
Yeah.
And what other information did they uncover? New information? They provide new information, or
No, none.
Okay.
Nothing. Oh, the new witness. Sorry, I thought you were
Yes.
talking about the police. I'm like, no, nothing, not at all.
Yeah, the new
I mean,
witness.
the physical evidence, but they knew what they were doing. They're like, yes, we've determined that she died, and it was, the rope did it, and it was obvious. We saw that, and, fantastic, well done, whatever. But yeah, no, the third witness, the key thing, like a lot of things, we got a lot from her. Number one, so in order for them to close a case like that, they do have something that was evident when I spoke to the police. They do have a checklist that we did something called a psychological autopsy. We conducted something called that. And in the parlance, what that is in death investigations, it was something developed over decades between suicide prevention associations in the United States, mostly, not entirely, but anyway, suicide prevention associations with law enforcement agencies to come up with a way after death to look at a person's lifestyle and all of the risk indicators that suicide prevention associations look for in advance when they're dealing with people. It was a way for law enforcement to, without all of that training, to be able to look back and say, what is the likelihood that this was a suicide aside from how she physically died? Because suicide is kind of an easy thing to stage if you know what you're doing. You could choke someone out, and then they lose consciousness, and then you put them up and that's why hanging is so popular now as a way to end your life, because you lose consciousness before you die. It's not, the rope doesn't have to kill you for the staging to all work on paper. So
When you're talking about staging suicides, how easy it is, I think every middle-aged housewife probably knows that because every one of them watch those true crime stories when they
Yeah.
get to that age. And I think it's because I gotta find a way to get out of this
Yeah.
marriage soon. So like I gotta start
I
watching
know.
this.
I know. They like when you like some of those stories, you hear them talk like when they talk about how, either one person or two people were deciding how they were going to try to get away with something, and it's always stuff they got from TV. Like it's always something like I'm gonna be honest, like completely upfront. Like so, two things that for the Chatham case that we got that we discovered and were able to prove that the police weren't able to. One of them was time of death from her smartwatch, because your smartwatch, like even just a Fitbit, is constantly monitoring your heart rate. So we're like, if like her smartwatch would have picked up her telemetry, that was something from Brooklyn Nine-Nine that I saw when I was watching it, like when it was an episode when they're like, oh, he was wearing a Fitbit, we could figure out exactly when he died. And I was like, oh, if she was wearing a smartwatch, right? Like it's not, some of this true crime stuff or even fiction. Like I have a history in television production and creative writing, and the truth is, like, people are like, it's all fiction, it doesn't matter. Definitely do not take advice from some TV show you watch. I don't care if reality is in the title. However, there's a word called verisimilitude that you bump into a lot in textbooks when you're studying creative writing and script writing, etc. And that is the semblance of reality. It's, what you're producing, whether it's a TV show or a novel or whatever, even if it's completely fiction, it has to be based in a lot of truth, the way things would work in reality. The thing that you put out there has to, for the most part, be plausible based on a person with a basic understanding of what you're talking about. Because otherwise it lacks verisimilitude. There's something called a fourth wall, like when you're watching or reading something. The fourth wall just, disappears, and suddenly you're like, I know this is fiction now. I can't suspend my disbelief. I'm not enjoying it anymore. So, for this case, it was a really basic thing. But yeah, we found her time of death, and it was at 8:45 in the morning, which was much earlier than the estimated time of death that the detective gave based on lividity. They gave it like between 9:30.
For the smartwatch, how did you get access to the telemetry data?
So it was, because it was iPhone, all of it was on the cloud. Whenever you have an iPhone or a smartwatch or whatever, actually iPhones in particular, it's kind of a security risk when you have an iPhone or any Apple product, because in this case, it was a positive thing for us. But what everyone should realize is that Apple products, because they're trying to sort of, when you buy an Apple product, they're trying to trap you into buying only Apple things. So you can't like get an Android phone and an Apple tablet. Like, it's just a huge headache. But if you get an Apple phone with your tablet, then it automatically syncs everything. And the other thing is that your it automatically, like, it won't, like, once you have an Apple ID, it's like that's your ID for life. It's almost like an encryption key. It's not, but like, if you have an Android, you could have like 16 different Gmail addresses and you could burn them, like you could do whatever you want, but Apple doesn't really let you do that in the same way. So it means that if, like in this case, she had a phone, she had a tablet, and she had a smartwatch. The police took the phone, but they didn't think about the no, they took the phone and the tablet, but I think all they looked at was her browser history. Like, they didn't, because the phone,
to commit suicide.
Yeah, exactly, which wasn't there, by the way. But all of these, I know, but all of these, but all of the information that is collected by all of these smart apps that she had on her phone, where the apps are collecting the information from the smartwatch and from the phone simultaneously, which it was important in this case. All of that information is saved under that Apple ID in the cloud. So if you have access to her, like her password and all of that stuff, and you have like the smartwatch, you have to actually put it on before it'll sync with the phone. For a while, I was like, I had trouble accessing certain kinds of information until I figured that out. So yeah, the smartwatch, it was just, the data was accessible technically without the smartwatch, but not the last, say, 10, 15 minutes of data, because that data had yet to transfer from the smartwatch to the cloud yet, because it was like after it hadn't had an opportunity to do that after she died. So when I finally figured out that, it could sync, you had to physically put on the watch so that it could sync with the phone, and then, the data went to the cloud. What we did is submitted the password and her Apple ID to an agency in the United States. It's called Digistream, and they specialize in digital forensics and device forensics. All that's anything digital that has to do with, answering investigative questions. So we sent it to them, and they sent us back a report that gave us telemetry data in the in chronological order for each measure that the phone and the smartwatch were pulling, and it indicated whether it was the watch or the phone that pulled the data. So the heart rate data was only really useful for one thing, because it was only collecting a new heart rate reading every 5 to 10 minutes, and the last 2 or 3 readings were like, that gap was present. So it doesn't take 5 to 10 minutes to, say, choke someone out. So if her heart rate was spiking or like even if she did commit suicide, if her heart rate was spiking while that was happening, it wouldn't be necessarily be picked up by the watch or the phones, or no, the phone wasn't doing heart rate, but it wouldn't necessarily be picked up by the watch. So it wasn't something that we even commented on, but it did determine time of death. The bit of telemetry that was really interesting though, so step rate step rate is what it's called, right? Okay, step rate, is that what that's called? Step count.
Yeah.
Step count, yeah.
Same
So,
thing.
yeah, thank
count
you.
the same
Thank
thing.
you. Yeah, same thing. But it's not a scientific measure of anything. Like so the way the watch works to measure step count is if you're walking, you're swinging your arms. So, and you do cover distance, which I think is kind of part of it, but the swinging of the arms is the important bit. And so if you have your phone on you and your smartwatch, if you ignore the step count that the phone and the watch comes up with, that's for consumers that are interested in like, how many steps have I taken? It's kind of a sort of quasi thing that tells you how active you are. Ignore it. Take that data and treat it like what it is, a recording of her movement. Like just it's time period. It's like the amount of time somebody has moved from the beginning to the end of when they stopped. So it's periods of motion interspersed with periods of relative stillness. And if
It has to be, like you said, a very specific motion. It has to be like a waving of the arms, right? The watch has to detect that, right?
Well, this is the thing that was so great, is because she was wearing her watch and had her phone on her, it meant that the specific kinds of movement that the phone picks up on and that the watch pick up on, that limitation that each has, like the step count for the watch, it's the swinging of the arms. So like me, you could see I talk with my hands, right? If I'm having I'm like, listen, you blah, blah, blah. If I'm just like kind of moving, the watch is going to register a step count. Like it's going to register that the person is still moving that period of movement, that the watch, it starts at a time and then stops at a time. It's going to be much longer than that same period when it's picked up by the phone, because phone is picking up distance it doesn't know like if your arms are swinging or whatever, or if you're, whatever. It's picking up distance that you're covering, and based on how fast you're going, it knows whether you're it knows whether you're walking or biking or whatever. So if you're moving slowly, it treats it at like a step count. Now, one of the things that isn't technically open source intelligence, like it's not data itself. There's a proliferation of tools that are available online that are like very low cost, if any cost at all. And they're developed by people who, want to contribute to whatever. I don't know why they do these wonderful, heroic things that they do. But the point is that the tools are designed to work with open source intelligence. So, for example, there's a tool online called Timeline something. It's a tool that was developed for scholars or researchers who say they're like researching the Byzantine Empire. So they want to, it started this year and this month or whatever, and this is when this happened. Da, 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 da. But the way it works is that you don't have to use it for like really long periods of time like that. You can develop a timeline because just the way it works, it's like, okay, well, you put in a time where you want it to start, date and time, and a time, date and time you want it to stop on the timeline. And then it'll just expand it so that on your screen, you're looking at like equally spaced increments of time between the start and end time that you put there. So what I did is because I didn't know if the smartwatch data was going to be useful for anything except for the heart rate. But I'm like, okay, let's see this data that we have from the phone and the watch. That Digistream sent it back. We had this list of numbers. So I entered, first of all, I had a start and end time that was
CSV or a JSON that you got back from them that you could upload, or what kind of data, what kind of format did you get back from them?
Oh, they sent back a report that was a PDF. So it wasn't like, I could have asked them for like an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, but the amount of data, like I didn't need all of it. I just needed like a data. It was literally 45 minutes that mattered. Because number one, we had a statement that a guy gave, and we're like, we think that he's lying. We don't think that, we don't know exactly to the extent that he's lying, but we think he's lying about something because this story is weird. So we have his statement here, and it was very specific with things that happened and when they happened, like down to the minute. He had that he'd like left at 8:18 a.m. He said that specifically because we were going through it like very sort of minutely like that. So when I got to the computer, I just took their report and just entered the values that they had in the list, indicated for whether it was the watch or the phone. So what I ended up with was a timeline on my screen that started at 8 a.m. and ended at 8:55. Like I just extended it at the end. And then on that timeline, I had in green all the times where movement started and finished according to the smartwatch. So you had periods of movement with periods of stillness, and the same thing then, but in a different color. It was in purple for the phone, when a movement would start and when a movement would finish. And what I found, and it was a revelation to put it in this tool that somebody just put on. They're like, thanks for $10 a month. You can have access, have fun with it. I was able to see her movements between 8 and 8:45. And because the two things were corroborating each other, like the movements, they ended at different times in a predictable way. So the smartwatch, the window of time that she was, quote, moving was always longer than the phone. So if she was, they always started at exactly the same time, but they would end at different times. So if she was, I knew that for the distance, like for the amount of time that the purple time was there, that's distance she was covering. It couldn't tell us how much distance, but she was covering some distance. She started moving, covered a bit of distance. And then the green count meant that she was just like, if she was doing the dishes, if she was lifting boxes, if she was like having a talk with somebody and maybe just sort of doing whatever, that's at the end, that's what she was doing after the time she started moving. And what we found was that, like, at 8 o'clock, all of her friends left, and she was completely still for like 20 minutes. No movement at all. She didn't, like, there no step count, so there was no distance covered, and she didn't whatever. And this is the statement, like the last statement that, and this is the other point I wanted to make, is that open source intelligence is, like, as a tool, the data it produces, it needs to be combined with human intelligence. It needs to be combined with contextual data. You need a hermeneutic approach to answering an investigative question. You need to engage with the people and with the context of the circumstance, the context and the circumstances, because that's the the different kinds of data need to fuel the analysis of the other, if what you're really trying to get at is the truth. Like in this case, the woman that we spoke to, what she told us was that before they left at 8 o'clock, the last conversation that they had with her at the table was concerned plans that she had for that morning at 8:30. 10 minutes to 8, she was supposed to, the night before, she had been at a barbecue at her mother's house. Her mother was going on vacation that next day, and left the dog in the apartment and said, like, it made arrangements with Robin to pick up the dog. So her and this other guy that were there, were making arrangements for the evening, who was going to be the designated driver. So the plan they made was that he was going to be her designated driver. She was going to leave her car at the house, like at her mother's house, and then the next morning, he was going to drive her back to her mother's house to pick up the dog and to pick up her car. Okay, so it's 10 minutes to 8 o'clock. The guy that was going to drive her is there, and the woman is there, and this other guy is there. The conversation at the table is Robin wanted to, she's like, look, we've been up all night. Oh my God, now it's time to go to my mother's house. Let's just go. Like, it's time. I'm still wide awake, so, let's go. She's trying to convince them to, because remember, she doesn't have her own car, to take her to her mother's house to follow through on these plans so she could be there on time as planned. But the person who was there, pointed it out that she probably couldn't drive her car back. It was important. Like, she's like, listen, you're kind of woozy. You're not, I wouldn't let you drive a car right now. So even if we drive you to your mother's house to pick up the dog, let's get some sleep first, and then we'll go. And she pushed back because she wanted to, the plan was to be there for 8:30. That's what she told her mother she was going to do. She wanted to be there. And she also said that she had concerns about her sister. And she was going to see her sister when she went over to the house at some point. So she really pushed for them to take her. But in the end, she agreed. Let's get some sleep and then go. So after her friends left, we're looking at the telemetry data from the smartwatch for showing like blocks of movement versus blocks of stillness. And it looks like after they left, she tried to get some sleep. Like, she sat down or lied down and just didn't move for 20 minutes. After that, you see movement. But here's the thing. So what happens is this person is pushing, has plans for a particular time, is pushing to see through those plans where people will be, and it'll extend into the afternoon or whatever, but it's at 8:30 that she wants to be there. The friends leave, and then she hangs herself at 8:45. It doesn't...
Yeah, that doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up. It doesn't make any sense. And I mean, remember, the police didn't have it didn't have the woman's statement, and the other two guys who were there, they didn't mention any of that. Their vested interest, and I could say this factually because they've both said it, like they both kind of admitted it, was their vested interest was having the case ruled a suicide, because if it was ruled a homicide, they were the first suspects. And being a suspect in a homicide is a big deal. Like, it's not, we say guilty until proven innocent. But let's get real. Like, if you're in a small town and, everyone knows that you're a suspect in a homicide, if that's the ruling, if it's possible. So,
that's like immediate ostracization, like from the entire community. Like, no one's going to talk to you.
Well, yeah, and like in the case, like, I don't want to get too specific with these third parties, but like it was immediately a thing after she died, and because like the police ruled it officially a suicide a couple of weeks later. Before that, ostensibly, like there's just some things that, like, for example, the police told the family that they were going to run a toxicology, because the first guess was, well, maybe she was drugged or something, and then that's we early on in the investigation, a theory we looked into was maybe it was an accidental overdose. Because there were drugs involved earlier in the evening, so the police said that they were going to run a toxicology. So they sat there and waited for the results of the toxicology. And what we learned later, eventually, because another coroner higher up did a review, we found the original autopsy report, and they didn't run a toxicology. They didn't even bother. Like, so the evidence that we found, like that movement data, was really important because, for obvious reasons, like it corroborates what the woman's statement. It corroborates the woman's statement, what Robin had agreed to do. There were, and it also, the other thing that her statement was important for was the accepted reason for her, the accepted reason why she ended her life, like the precipitating event that, in the checklist that the police have. She had a fight with her boyfriend at the bar, and she had the last text message that she sent was to her boyfriend, and it said, "All that I wanted was you." And earlier than that, the message that she sent a little bit earlier than that, like an hour earlier or something, she said, "You broke me." So out of context, you're looking and you're like, she had a fight with her boyfriend, and the last things she say are like, "You broke me and all I wanted was you." It sounds like a TV ending where with a woman committing suicide over this terror. Like, it sounds like they broke up and she's beside herself. "All I wanted was you, but now that I don't have you, my life is over."
It sounds like you got hints on how to solve a case from a TV show, and it sounds like the detectives just wanted to be a TV show.
Yeah, 100%. Like,
Mariah Carey tells me all she wants is me every Christmas.
You should worry about her. You should make sure you find her alive next time you see her. Yeah, no, like that was exactly the thing, is that it was in that context. It was it sounded like it was grammatically written to be read later, and to refer backwards. Like it was just the evidence was like the worst kind of circumstantial, right? Like it was literally just the grammar. The other two guys
Is it enough to compare those latest two texts to previous texts for language? I know they're short, but sometimes you can still get a feel for how people type and write.
Well, that was a concern. Like, it was like, did somebody else write them? I don't think someone did. What the other thing that the woman was able to clarify for the record was the nature of this fight with her boyfriend. The other two guys weren't there, but they cited this fight as being what made her so upset to the point where she ended her life. That was what was really emphasized, was how she felt about this fight. But neither of those guys were actually present for the fight. They didn't know the details. The woman did. And what she explained, and the boyfriend, when we talked to him, he backed this up, was that it was kind of it was a dumb bar fight over a misunderstanding. What happened was he thought that, like, she had canceled plans with him that night because she said she wanted to have a girls' night and hang out with this woman, this other friend of hers. So he's like, okay, that's fine. But then later at the bar, he sees her. It's a very small town. There's like 3 bars. So later at the bar, he sees her and she's with some guy and he has his arm around her or something. And it totally misinterprets the situation and decides that he's going to make her jealous too, by putting on a show with some other woman. But she was just like, she was there with her friend, like she said she was going to be, and this other guy was just an acquaintance that they ran into, and maybe he was being a little handsy. Like, it was a random thing. So she sees her boyfriend like carrying on with some other woman, and it obviously upsets her a great deal. It's like, why is he doing this? He's doing it in front of her. So she goes to him and they have this fight. Now, they figure out the misunderstanding. Like, this is what the woman sort of points out, is like, yeah, she's like, this is what happened. They sort of figure it out. So later, they're still together. This was the key. Even if you didn't know what the nature of the fight was, she's like, all I wanted was you. It's like she still had him. They hadn't broken up. So why would that be her last message? Like, all I wanted was you. It was her suicide that ended the relationship, not vice versa. And that was exactly what the, like, understanding the fight told us, is that when she said, you broke me, she was referring to the show he was putting on. And when she said, all that I wanted was you, she was referring to what his issue was. Is that, like, you know, she's at the bar with this other guy, and, like, you know, I thought it was us. It's just the 2 of us, and what the hell are you doing with this other guy or whatever? She's like, all I wanted was you. It's not, you know, so that's really important. You know, like, if this stupid bar fight is going to be accepted, as circumstantial as it is, if nonetheless you go, like, okay, I'm going to accept this, that, yeah, she had a fight with her boyfriend and she's that fragile that she decides to hang herself that night over the result of this fight, well, you need to confirm, like, those messages, you need to confirm that your conclusions are not correct, that you're not just assuming that, like, oh, yeah, I saw that TV show, that's totally, yeah, it's a suicide note.
From your
Because
perspective,
it totally wasn't.
so from your perspective, we have the movement data, we have the extra witness that the police didn't interview. What else in the investigation, if there was any, that led you to believe that this was most likely a homicide or some other form of manslaughter, murder over
or something,
suicide?
Yeah. Well, okay, so the psychological autopsy was, so most people have some kind of background, like something in their background that, like, maybe you drink a bit too much, or maybe in the past you've had too much to drink. Maybe you had a period where you went through depression, or you saw a therapist. These are all very common things. But in the context of reviewing somebody's lifestyle and mental health and their physical health, their financial health, like things that as an individual thing, we all have them. They pile up they pile up and together become a likelihood that somebody will end their life. When people end their life, it is a myth that people just suddenly up and decide to commit suicide. If you look back on a real suicide, you will find people, like, suicides often happen and they're a surprise. But when you look back, if you conduct an investigation into the circumstances, you will find the risk factors that are there. And in this case, so that's the point of the psychological autopsies, that you look back and it doesn't tell you anything definitively, but in combination with a bunch of other things, if there are not enough risk factors that explain the suicide, that's a reason for you to investigate further. And that's what we found, is that actually in her case, she had no history of depression. And to be clear, we, not the police, we pulled all of her prescription records. We pulled all of her OHIP, and like in Quebec and Ontario, we pulled all of their, because the family had next of kin, so we pulled all of her records. So every time she went to a doctor and, you know, they charged it to OHIP or to the healthcare in Quebec, there's a record of that. So we had her complete prescription. That's the other thing, is she was filling her prescriptions at the same pharmacy every time for a very long time. So we had her history of prescriptions. We had her appointment history with doctors, including with any specialists. And she had no history of depression whatsoever. Never, no prescriptions for like mental health things, like no anti-anxiety things, no whatever, no psychiatrists, no, like she had all of her health issues were pedestrian. They were just like, not to get into them because they're like respecting her privacy, but they were not like, and we had a picture, and we were able in her house to take a picture because she was kind of messy. We were able to we took pictures of every single a prescription bottle or package we could find to look into those medications or whatever. And I thought they weren't going to be very useful, but in the end they were, because we were able to compare all of the packages with what was on the list, and we had a perfect relationship between them. She just never thrown out any of those packages. So we did have one appointment that she had made that was a standout, like it wasn't with the same doctor she normally saw. So we looked into that to see, like, was it was she, because maybe she was dying of something. Maybe it was new. Maybe she was decided she needed a referral to a therapist. And no, like even that appointment, it was with a specialist, but it was for a routine screening for like something like cervical cancer or whatever. Like you get these notices in the mail, and the appointment was for 3 days after she died. So she had this appointment that she booked to a routine screening, and she just never attended it. That was the only outlier we could find over the previous,
It's also not a fun screening, so like if you're planning on, you're not also signing up for that.
Yeah, that was
exactly.
Very invasive, very intense. And then also going back to your mention of, suicide being a very deliberate act. I have had people in my life, Chris, I know you have as well. We have discovered evidence that people genuinely plan out how it's going to happen, almost to a very, very minute detail, because they know it is a finality, and they don't look at it as a way like, oh, I'm trying to solve all my problems. It's like, I'm trying to remove myself as a problem from others, usually.
Exactly.
So there would be journals, there would be, like, she would be giving away things, she would be reaching out to people. So it seems like in this instance, where the police determined those two texts may be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing it, from a perspective of someone who's looked at suicide, maybe not.
Well, yeah, absolutely, exactly. That's it. Like when you looked at her life, the psychological autopsy, we interviewed something like 10 people, and that was the other thing, is that the people that the police chose to interview were very much convenience. Like they talked to the two guys. They didn't talk to the woman because they, quote, didn't know she was there. But they did talk to another witness because she just happened to be there with the boyfriend, and she happened to be a friend of Robin's when the police spoke to him on the phone. This was my understanding from my conversation with the police, because the woman they spoke to, we knew what her relationship with Robin was, because we spoke to like her family, a dozen of her friends. Like we got to know Robin really well, and these were like, and that's how we chose the people that we were going to speak to, is they were people that knew her over time and that had a very close relationship with her, really like people that were very much a part of and aware of her, like the context that is her life. Like every person is the center of the universe, and all of these people were involved in her universe over an extended period of time. And they, she was selling her house. and about to come into money as a result. Like, she had problems with debt, but this is how she was going to handle it. She was moving it into with her mother on this farm that had horses and animals that she was really in love with. She had 2 dogs that were rescues that she adored. She had a niece that she was very much very, very close to. And it was a little girl who was like 3-4 years old. And she, she had trips planned, like hard plans to go to various places. It just, there was all of those things that you look for, like the person, like, are they like afraid that they're about to be homeless? Are they a burden? It was the opposite. Like, she had a very close relationship with her the immediate members of her family. She had siblings, she had mom, and they had stupid fights, like there's part of like the police looked at some of this stuff and were like, ugh, human intelligence, that's the worst. But like, we were like, no, tell me about the dumb bar fight. Like, give me the details of, this dumb fight that you had with your sister down, whatever. Because that stuff is not pedestrian to you. It matters to you. So that stuff, and it drives behavior. It drives events that come next. So, and yeah, it was, in fact, like, it was a small thing, but she, on her tablet, she had a list of movies that she wanted to see. She was keeping it in Notepad or whatever, and the most recent addition to that list, she made that day. She put like a movie that she wants to see, like another movie on that list that day. And I'm like, it's small, but it's not. Like, if in the middle of the afternoon you're like, yeah, here's a dozen movies that I want to see. Oh yeah, I also want to see this one. You don't have plans to kill yourself the next morning. Like, you just, like, again, it's a small thing. But in combination with all of this other stuff, and we, like, when we gave the report to the police, the digital stuff, like, the digital evidence, like, all of it, like, everything that we're saying is technically circumstantial. But if the police ruled a case suicide based on the physical evidence that they saw on the scene, they're like, yeah, no, she totally died by this rope, that like, she totally died, like, this is what they can confirm, is that she killed herself, like, that she died of strangulation using the ligature, and it matches the marks on her neck. Okay. But that can be staged. It's been staged in the past. It's not even necessarily that hard. And it's easy to come across, like, ways to do that, or it doesn't, like, you don't drug the person. There are drugs that you could use that don't come up on a toxicology because they don't look for everything. But even just like security, we were reading, there was forensic research into ways, like, things to watch for when you're looking, like, when you come on the scene and you're looking for staging. One of the things that they point out to keep in mind when it comes to hanging is that you can choke someone out, like, so that they pass out. If you keep hanging on, like, if you have a security license, it's one of the things, it's part of your training, how to do that. And a lot of people have security licenses, and it also just happens that security, people that are drawn to private security have a higher than usual, again, just the population that is described that way has a higher than usual correlation with domestic violence issues. So it's like, the point being that if you can choke someone out. She's like, in this case, she's a small woman. She's like 120, 130 pounds, roughly, give or take. And like, some of the, like, people that we were looking at that could be responsible were quite a bit bigger, like, could lift her. If you have a rope and then you lift her, and it wouldn't be difficult, is the point. So
with respect to your time, I would like to hopefully try to provide some finality for our audience, which I don't think you can based on what we've heard today.
Yeah.
With the case, where
Right.
is it standing right now? Do you feel like the police are going to take your information seriously, your investigation, or do you feel like it's just going to remain open until they feel like they're going to get around to it, or would they just keep it closed?
Oh, they have already ruled. They've already told us that they're going to keep it closed. They've already told the family that they they basically threw me under the bus, or they tried to, and said to the family, they're like, we're really sorry that this investigator has given you the impression that, you know, like it's they're making it like difficult for you to move on, blah blah blah. But it rang false for the family, because they're like, well, it was 35 pages of evidence, and not just evidence. Like, we weren't just like providing 35 pages worth of analysis. It was all corroborated. It was like the digital stuff. Like, they paid thousands of dollars to have that all like third party provided. It was like we had verified and corroborated evidence, and I walked the family carefully through every piece, and I did not declare either way whether I thought it was a suicide or not until very late in our investigation, because I didn't want to do that. I didn't want, like, you don't, because I don't know. I didn't know. You don't know, and I still technically don't know. I mean, it's technically possible that like she had like immediate plans and all of this life and whatever, and then she's like just like just like decides to very suddenly kill herself. But you know, like but towards the end, I'm like, yeah, no, I don't think she killed herself. I don't like, there's nothing. And so I asked to speak to the police. I was like, can I speak to them? I want to go through my report, because it was so sloppy and terrible. I want to know why. Like, where is that? So when I got him on, when I was talking to him, number one, there was an issue with the physical evidence. We didn't have access to that. So, and there was an interpretation of the scene that we made based on the sister's account of what she saw, like the first person on the scene. Like, she said that she saw that like the feet were off the ground and there was no noose. The rope wasn't tied into a noose. It was just a loop around her neck and the beam. And those two things together are so vanishingly rare in cases of hanging that there's a lot of scholarly, like, anytime it's happened, there's scholarly research related to it. And they talk about, you know, and there are things about the scene that her sister came across that do not correlate with these other cases. So I had that section, and I shouldn't have put it there, because it was an invitation to the police to just dismiss it because they knew that I had that limitation. Whereas, like, I didn't see the physical evidence. I couldn't confirm that what the sister saw, or what she said she saw, is in fact what she saw, because I didn't have access to any of the pictures of the crime scene. And according to police, like, the account that she has given and their account of what the scene looked like are different. And so that section, everything we wrote there, they can say it was all nonsense. And as a result, they sort of just didn't look at the rest of it. They didn't read the transcripts of the interviews that we did. The telemetry, I don't think he realized that telemetry was referring to movement data as well as the heart rate. I don't think he read that section of the report very carefully. Because when we talked about it, he kept talking about the heart rate and that it would have spiked if she was being attacked. And I was like, well, no, we know, because if you look closely at the data we gave you, you can see that there's too much time between readings for any conclusive whatever. But he kept emphasizing that. He kept coming back to it whenever telemetry would come up. And I'm like, the movement data, did you look at the movement data? And he would just blow past it. And then the statement from the woman, like, where I was like, look, like, she had plans, not just like to travel or whatever, but she had plans at 8:30, to go to her mother's house. And he's like, well, sometimes people just up and that's it. And I'm like, no, they don't.
Sounds like
There's
he
a
had
thing.
anchoring bias, because he kept going back to his information that he had in his notes. And Also, you kept reminding me of a movie that I love. It's got Gerard Butler, and it's called Law Abiding Citizen, where a
Okay.
prosecutor wanted to keep his prosecution rate high, but at the 99% level, and was unwilling to take the extra step to try to find information so they could convict him at a higher charge. So it
Right.
kind of seems like I won't say that there's probably a family member who will go to the length that Gerard Butler did to try to get a resolution. But I do think that this is kind of the same way. Like, hey, we have a high solve rate. We want to keep it high. So this is how we're going to end it today.
Yeah. Well, I actually I did a bit of research before, as part of the investigation, and after I spoke to him into Chatham as a city and the crime rate and a homicide rate and whatever. It's a small town, so it was tough to get some of that data that specific. But what I found is that it's actually it looks like the homicide rate is 0. It looks like it's the first time I've found that, where I'm doing research into the demographics or whatever of a place, and you look into the criminality and the homicide rate is so low, a non-existent. But the death rate, accidental death, the sudden death rate, is high, quite high. It's things like suicide, but also injuries, all the ways that a person would die early that you can imagine. Chatham has an unusually high number of those. And the crime rate there is all drugs. It's all there's a lot of DUIs. Every guy in our, there are a lot of guys in our case that we were looking at that had DUIs or had recently crashed their car. And we're like, look, guys, I crashed my car. I'm like, what is it with the city? And what it made me think is that, maybe the police came on the scene and it was another homicide, it's really humdrum, that it's another death. We're used to coming to the scene and find sudden deaths, and we're used to processing them as what kind of sudden accidental death is it? And they're just not typically looking for homicide. If there's just maybe, and I'm not actually conjecturing that this is the case. I'm not, I don't want to be I'm maybe there's a satanic cult at work. No, but what I do want to say is that it's possible that some of these other quote accidental deaths, if that's how they're approaching investigation, is by coming on the scene. It's obvious what happened. This is what he said, is that, the reason they didn't interview anyone else or look for anyone else or do the whatever it was obvious is the word he used. So maybe the police are coming on a scene and it's quote obvious that it was a suicide, and what that means is that no, it's a staged suicide. That's obviously what he staged it to look like. If it was staged, obviously that's what he was going for, and he did it. Yay. That's what's obvious, but nothing else is obvious until you conduct a thorough investigation and test your assumptions. And if they're just not doing that because they are comfortable believing that it's a waste of time because their first observations are what is obviously true, so actually conducting an investigation is a waste of time and resources, because they're just going to find what they, was right in what they knew was right in the first place. How many
what
cases
they expect to find, what their experience says, also what they've been trained to do, and what they're allowed to look for as well. I've actually been involved in some interviews, and I've been at some conferences where cryptocurrency arises, and then a police department just stops the investigation. They're like, we can't look into that because we don't have the resources, and so they all send everything to the federal level. They send it to the FBI, they send it to NGOs like ICAC and stuff like that. So it kind of just stops right there. So I can totally see where hey, either the resources aren't there for us to fully investigate this, or we just don't have the time.
Yeah, he was and this is this was the point when I hung up on him. He was because that's when I finally addressed what he said to the family about our investigation, because we were on the phone for about half an hour, and it was obvious to me that he had actually not reviewed anything. He didn't look at our evidence. He didn't read the report very carefully at all. Well, And then I addressed the issue that he had thrown us under the bus and was calling our investigation sloppy, whatever. And he was like, well, I just think it's irresponsible to tell the family that it could be homicide when it, and I interrupted him. I'm like, I think it's irresponsible to rule that it was anything either way without conducting a thorough investigation. But like he was talking, like we were talking over each other, and I don't think he heard that. And finally I was like, look, I need to end this conversation. It's not going anywhere. And I don't think he heard that either, because he just kept talking. So finally I just said it one more time and I hung up.
At that point,
But I feel
there's an ego contusion involved.
I guess. To answer your question about where the case is at now, I spoke to the family about it, and we're just trying to find opportunities to make the investigation that we conducted public. Like I'm revising it to, we're taking out the physical evidence, because they have opted not to send us any. Like, they're not going to release any of the. At first, they were going to release the evidence to us. They promised once the case, if it was remain closed, that they would do that, but they haven't. They said afterwards to the family that they're not going to release any of that. So we can't review it and whatever, but we didn't need that. Like, that was the last thing that I added because of how unusual that is. If you're going to suddenly hang yourself and you're not there was a nice rope. It was long. It was hanging on the wall. It was perfect. It was like the game of Clue, where you had to pick a piece to indicate that somebody was killed with the rope and the whatever. A rope that looked exactly like that was tied and whatever and hanging on the wall right in front of her. Why would you hang yourself with an electrical cord, not with a noose? So you have to lean into it, and it's this weird thing where it's kind of behind your ears, when you could just use a noose. Like, why would you do that if you're suddenly committing suicide? So we felt we had to comment on that. But it gave the police the excuse they needed to dismiss the rest of it, because they knew that we hadn't seen the pictures or any of the other physical evidence up close, and they just dismissed what the sister says that she saw. And again, human intelligence is much easier to dismiss. People will totally dismiss that. Digital evidence, however, if they're like, no, digital evidence, OSINT, here, this is what the data says. And that they just dismissed, barely looking at it. Like, they just basically skipped it. They were happy that the woman who spoke, the woman that they missed her testimony, they're like, yeah, well, it doesn't matter, we just didn't know. Nope, that's.
Yeah. Number one, thank you so much for actually walking us through an investigation for our listeners that we can share. They rarely ever get to hear any of that, especially something with this far-reaching, consequences that this could have. But Chris, do you have anything? Okay. But Charlie, thank you so much.
Of course. No, thank you for letting me talk about it. The family will be grateful too.
Yeah, the story needs to be out there. Again,
absolutely.
Anything could probably help out. I mean, this could prompt a witness who was hiding in the shadows to come forward and be like, you know what? I had a pair of binoculars and saw the whole thing go down.
Well, yeah, and they might have. So in that case, they should send an email to. We actually have a dedicated email. And it's mccall@sydneyblack.ca. MCCALL
include that in the description.
sydneyblack.ca. Thank you. Okay, so and thank you also. You guys are awesome. You're just hilarious. So, I look forward to
humor. I'm reading his quotes.
Whatever, it's working, guys. I'm just, you're hilarious.
And I hope you have to do a part 3. There's more stories, and I want to hear them.
Oh yeah, actually there very much is. There's I want to tell you about the big I've got some good ones.
It's not a good thing right just yet, but thank you guys so much for listening. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe. But this has been the OSINT Output with Chris and Tim,
and Charlie and Sydney.
Yep. Thanks guys, you're great, and thank you everybody for listening.